Hello, Kathy, Luz, Connie, Christine, Rebecca, Tricia, Ayla, Alyssa, Alicia, and Jasmine. Thank you for another great week of discussion in week 4, and thank you for all of your hard work on the project management plan. Some of you have gone back and done some revisions to part 1, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate your attention to detail and your willingness to go back and refine things, because that is exactly what a project manager does when working on a project in real life. As I've said before, project management is an iterative process, and that's just a fancy word for meaning that you go through it again and again and again. You don't just write the plan once and say, oh, well, it's done, don't have to think about it anymore. But as planning continues, things change. You find out more information. You discover problems that you didn't know that were there. You discover opportunities that you didn't know were there. And so it's a process. And so I appreciate your willingness to go back and look at that again. As we moved into week 4 and tried to estimate some costs, come up with a budget, this is very challenging. It's very challenging, especially because, quite frankly, you don't have all the information that you could in order to do this well. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns. Some of you pointed out, well, what about benefits? Shouldn't we be calculating the cost of benefits and uh, you know other aspects of employees when we're trying to figure out some of the indirect costs? And yes, I mean if you're looking at it in a lot of detail and trying to find out exactly what the budget would be, you would go into that kind of specificity. But for our purposes, we're just trying to get an idea of what the process is and see what some of the things are. And so you looked at direct costs, and a lot of you just said, yes, direct costs. So labor costs for the people in the company working on the project, the material costs, the subcontractors or outside labor costs, the equipment costs, the facility costs, all those things are direct costs. And as Rebecca and Alyssa pointed out, another direct cost is the cost of republishing the articles. So in that document from Module 2, the additional information about the Global Green Books project, that document has in there some information about how much does it cost to republish an article from Ellison Publishing? How much does it cost to republish an article from Avon Publishing? And that information would be direct costs into this project. Technically not materials, right? They're not physical things. They're fees that are paid in order to be able to republish the material. So it's a different category. And as Rebecca and Alyssa pointed out, part of the budgeting process. As you considered problems, a lot of good conversation about problems. Kathy pointed out, some of these estimates might be off. It's hard to come up with some of these estimates based on the information that we have. And if Global Green Books were a real company, and you were Samantha, you were this person who's has a little bit of project management knowledge, and you're coming in, it would be difficult. It would be very challenging to come up with good estimates. You'd have some information, but they would be estimates. They wouldn't be hard and fast, absolute, certain predictions. Rebecca, along the same lines, pointed out, it might be hard to figure out the number of hours that some of these employees are going to be working, especially some of the part-timers. How well trained are they? How quickly will they be able to accomplish some of the tasks that we have as we try to put together these custom books? Alicia was concerned about the possibility of poor planning. That's been part of the history of Global Green Books. That's why you have been hired to be the project manager, because in the past, the planning has not been so great. But that might be a difficult thing to change in terms of the company culture. So Alicia is right to point out, well, we have to consider that all the pieces might not fall into place. And Tricia pointed out, we might have some unexpected absences. We have a bunch of part-time student workers. Somebody might get sick. Somebody might have an exam, so they don't come into work because they need to study for their exam or work on a big paper. All of those things are possibilities. And and along those lines, Jasmine kind of pointed out the overarching problem to that is it's rare that a budget is spot on. She says it's rare that a budget is spot on. So how do project managers do a good job with this? How do they do an accurate estimate? And the answer is by gathering as much information as possible, and then also building in good management reserves and having that capacity to have some slack in the budget. That there's the ability to say, wait a minute, we have some things that we know could go wrong. There are some things that might not work out exactly as we planned, so we have some reserves to deal with that. But it's also quite honestly a matter of experience. As you studied the textbook, you see there's not just bottom up budgeting, but there's also analogous. And so when you have the experience of having done some other projects that are similar, that will help you to come up with a budget and cost estimates that are more accurate. Rebecca pointed out something too about this case study, and I apologize for this. She pointed out, well, what about these physical materials that are part of the printing and binding language that's in the case study? And I don't know why that got put in there. I think it was more metaphorical than literal. Global Green Books is producing ebooks, electronic books. They're not producing bound paperback or hardback books. Um, so I think those, like I said, those were metaphorical. So if you notice in the case studies, there's no paper, there's no ink, there's no binding supplies, there's no glue because they're not producing physical books. But I apologize for that kind of confusing language. But we're just doing electronic books. That's all we're doing as part of this project. As you move into next week with quality, risk, and communication parts of the project management plan, as you do these parts of the plan, I encourage you not just to think about um, how you'll do certain things or the steps that you'll take, or for example, in the risk management plan, not just identifying the potential risks, but also identifying how you would mitigate those risks. So, for example, if you said a risk is one of these publishers might say, you can't publish our article. So then what's a plan for dealing with that risk, for mitigating that risk? What's a possibility that that you could what's a possibility for dealing with that so that it doesn't derail the project? Think a little bit in those terms. For the communication part of the project, it's not just who do you need to communicate with, but what will be the mode of communication. So, if you have need to communicate with the owners, are you going to do a phone call? Are you going to do email? Are you going to arrange certain times where you meet face to face with the owners because you have significant things that you need to discuss? Just think about those things and put those into the communication part of the plan. And finally, if you had some trouble with the network diagrams, I'm going to post another video that will walk you through one of the network diagrams from the assignment. And feel free to go back and rework that assignment. The point here is to help you to see how to do this. It's not to stump you. And this is challenging stuff. So if you've had trouble with the network diagram piece of the assignment, there will be another video posted in the announcement section that you could use to help you to see that a little more clearly. And as always, if there are any questions that you have, if there's any way that I can be helpful, please reach out to me, send me an email, and if it's urgent or you just feel like you need to talk voice to voice, give me a call, or you could also always send me a text message. Thanks, and I look forward to our continued conversations in week 5.